So we are solving this example on tube-in-tube type of heat exchanger. Here there are in the inner tube, the other in the box. One of the fluid is hot water, which is entering at 90 degrees Celsius, and flow rate is 2 liter per second. It is to be cooled up to 60 degree Celsius, right? So that is the process requirement, that it should be cooled up to 60 degree Celsius. Now, you want to provide this cooling again with the help of another stream of water, and you know that this stream of water has a temperature of 30 degree Celsius. And with certain considerations, you have decided that this cold water flow rate would be 3 liters per second. Now this hot water flows through inner tube of this tube-in-tube heat exchanger. Right? One of the reasons why you decide that it should flow in the inner tube is that, if you make it pass through the inner tube, the outer tube temperature is comparatively low, so there are less losses of heat to the atmosphere. So this is one possible reason why you put it through the inner tube. Then, of course, because of that, this hot water flows through the inner tube of a tube-in-tube heat exchanger, and the ID of that inner tube. So the dimensions of the inner tube, the inner diameter is 23, outer diameter is 25 millimeter, outer tube outer tube only ID is engineering point. Find out which length of the tubes these tubes should be provided. So first is required. So this is basically a design problem for a heat exchanger. How much heat exchange area you need to provide for given satisfying the given process, and you can evaluate the counter flow as well as parallel flow configurations, and just to be able to compare the two configurations. So one of the first thing that you would you found that that should be equal to 245.685 kilowatt, right? So that's the duty of the heat exchanger. This is the amount of heat transfer that is required in the given heat exchanger. Maybe my internet connection is weak, but I don't know whether I can help in that circumstances. Okay. This is the duty of the heat exchanger. Let me zoom it a bit. Okay. Right. Yeah. Now, first thing that I might want to find is the temperature, the outlet temperature of cold water. I know that it is entering at 30 degrees Celsius. Outlet temperature. Uh, 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 that will be used this of the cold fluid as well as the hot fluid normally temperature. For that, fluid is gained by the cold water, right? So with that, this cold water temperature is found with the help of the energy balance, right? So that comes out to be 49.82 degree Celsius. So we had discussed it up to this point in the last lecture. Now the next thing that you will do is to find the log in temperature difference to find the I can this and in case you are not able, if the things are not clear currently, then you can watch the video and resolve those issues. Okay. Okay, so the next thing that you want to do is the finding the log mean temperature difference. So to find the log mean temperature difference, if the flow is counter flow, in that case, the hot water entry and the cold water exit will be on the same side. So that is say section 1 is and the second section is where the hot and the cold water is related with this diagram. This is section 1 left hand side and the section 2. So the hot water entering from one side that you see, there is no point in going on telling, right? So please don't write this. Okay, so section 1 and section 2. So let's say the hot water is entering from here and cold water is coming out, and so it's recommended that you draw the diagram as per the things given in this problem. All right. So at section 1, this is 40 degree Celsius, that is 40 degrees Celsius. So that is the temperature difference between the two fluids at section 1, right? So that is hot water entry and cold water exit. And then at the section 2, say on the right hand side, hot water is coming out and cold water is entering. So hot water exit temperature, you know, it is 60 and cold water inlet is 30. So obviously the difference is 30. So that is delta T2. Right? Now the definition of log mean temperature difference is delta T1 minus delta T2 upon delta T1 natural log of delta T1 upon delta T2. right? So if you put the values which you found here, you get a so you can also check whether you are getting the same number or not. 34.843 is the log mean temperature difference. Now, if you try to find the arithmetic average, then from this, right? Though in this case, we don't seem to be very much, but this is our accurate estimate of the temperature difference between the two fluids, which is responsible for the heat transfer. Okay, so this is log mean temperature difference for counter. Now you can calculate what would be the log mean temperature difference for the parallel flow, right? Be the log mean temperature difference for parallel flow. In case of parallel flow, taking the entry on the left hand side, section 1. So cold water as well as hot water will enter from the same side, right? Cold water as well as hot water will enter from the same side in case of parallel flow. So what will be the temperature difference? Delta T1. Now here it is CF. I'm talking about PF, parallel flow. So tell me what will be the temperature difference? Delta T1 in case of parallel flow, like the hot fluid and the cold fluid are entering from the same side. So what should be delta T1? Please write in the chat box. And then write how much would be delta T2 for parallel flow. So delta T2 is hot water as well as cold water exit. Right? Hot water as well as cold water exit. Okay, so I hope you are working on that. I don't think the answer should take this much time. At entry, the hot water enters at 60 and cold water enters at, hot water enters at 90 and cold water enters at 30. So the difference is 60, right? And at the exit for parallel flow, both of them are exiting. So hot water exits at 60 and cold water exits at 49.82. So the difference is to be put here, and then the log mean temperature difference for parallel flow can be found. Okay. Now, what is this exercise being done for? The exercise is being done for finding the area, or that will be available from the length, or which will be found from area of heat exchange, right? So what is the equation that you are going to use? Q is equal to UA delta T log mean, right? And you want to find out area. You already know how much Q is required, how much heat transfer rate is required. So now you are doing the required exercise to find U, that is overall heat transfer coefficient. Overall heat transfer coefficient. To be able to find overall heat transfer coefficient, you need to find individual resistances, right? There are three resistances which are working in series here, right? One of them is the on the inner film, on the inner tube, right? The inner surface. Then the wall conduction is playing a role, and then the other fluid is flowing in the annulus. So on the outer surface of the inner tube. So these are the three resistances or conductances to be calculated. So let's first focus on the heat transfer coefficient on the surface. You have found the proper cooled water hot is that you found the requirements of okay, so velocity is 4.814, that is the volume flow rate divided by the cross sectional area of the inner cross sectional area of the inner tube, right? So that's the velocity that you get. Then next thing is the value of rho, right? So because it is found at 45, which is taken as the outlet 90 and 60, right? So you should take it at 75, right? You should take it at 75. That is what I have taken, right, for hot water. So hot water, the properties are calculated at 75 degrees Celsius. As you could see here, this density of hot water is also found at 75 degrees Celsius, and the viscosity is also found at 75 degrees Celsius. Okay, so now you find out the Reynolds number, right? Find out the Reynolds number, rho v d upon mu, right? So rho is already known, velocity is known. How much is the diameter that you are going to take? It is the inner diameter of the inner tube. We are talking about the inner tube right now. So that's equal to 23 millimeters. Okay. And this value of dynamic viscosity is this, right? So you can again check from the tables whether you get the same number or not, right? So that is 3.792 into 10 raised to minus 4 kg per meter second, or Newton second per meter square. Okay. So that's the dynamic viscosity, and from that you find the Reynolds number. So Reynolds number is coming 2,06,662 roughly. Okay. So obviously this is much higher than 10,000, and the flow through the inner tube is surely turbulent flow, and you can use the Dittus-Boelter correlation, right? So now the Dittus-Boelter correlation is applied, and you find the Nusselt number. So the correlation is 0.023, Reynolds raised to 0.8, and Prandtl number raised to 0.3. Now Prandtl number is 2.393. So you're also satisfying the criteria for the Prandtl number for the Dittus-Boelter correlation, right? Which is what should be the Prandtl number value? What of Prandtl number value? I hope you people are there with me and doing the effort required from your side, right? Whatever calculations, whatever things are to be referred from tables, from your previous notes. Okay, I hope you are also preparing notes once the class is over, and whenever required you can watch the recording, and you should make your own notes. So with those notes you can very easily go back and check what was taught. So the Prandtl number value should be okay. So people are giving answer what is not asked yet, right? But not telling the answer what is asked at this point of time. Okay, so that answer is already there, right? So better you answer what I ask. So Prandtl number is like greater than 0.8. So you can use Dittus-Boelter correlation. So don't like blindly start using the correlation, right? Here the understanding is more important than following a given procedure. You should know when you can use it. From point of view of a real life problem, that is what is necessary, right? Though you may be able to solve the problem quickly in the exam, right? But even there are chances that you make a mistake if you don't do the required thinking at the right point of time. So to take a decision whether to use Dittus-Boelter correlation, you should one thing you should check is Reynolds number is greater than 10,000 or not, and second is your Prandtl number is higher or not, right? So that criteria is to be checked, and which is satisfied here. So you can use the Dittus-Boelter correlation. Now, whether Prandtl number is to 0.3 should be used or 0.4 should be used. What I used is 0.3, but make sure that what I have used is correct, right? Here you're talking about the hot water. So hot water is the fluid which is being cooled, and for that the Prandtl number, the exponent of Prandtl number should be 0.3. The heat transfer coefficient now, and for that the thermal conductivity of liquid water, which will be found at 75 degrees Celsius. So if you have the value available at 1780, you can take the average of that. And then the D that you will use here is the diameter of the inner tube, inner diameter of the inner tube, and you get the heat transfer coefficient 19,951, around 20. Worry for the heat transfer coefficient on the inner surface of the inner tube. Now let us start thinking about the outer tube or the annulus. So you need to find out the area of that, find the velocity of the cold water in that, and then which diameter should be used. So here it is annulus, so you should use the hydraulic diameter, which is nothing but the difference between the two diameters, the outer diameter of outer tube and inner diameter of the outer tube, right? So sectional area, you can find what is the cross sectional area, pi by 4, the square of the diameter, difference between those two, and hydraulic diameter is 4 times the cross sectional area, and the divided by wetted perimeter, which is the wetted perimeter is the diameter of outer tube, inner diameter, and the outer diameter of the inner tube. So that comes out to be 24 millimeters, okay, 0.024 meters. So now you can find out the Reynolds number to be calculated at what temperature? The inlet temperature of the cold water is 30 and outlet is around 50, right? You don't need to take that very exact 49.82. So you can find the properties of cold water at 40 degrees Celsius, right? So using those properties, the density, the hydraulic diameter is already available, and the viscosity of water at 40 degrees Celsius. So with that you get the Reynolds number equal to around 80,000, 79,680. So this is also quite high Reynolds number, and Prandtl number is also high, right? So you don't need to worry about which correlation to use. You can very convenient or rather comfortably use the Dittus-Boelter correlation again. So 0.023 Reynolds number is to 0.8 and Prandtl number is to 0.4, because here the fluid is being heated. So you get the Nusselt number 343.296, and heat transfer coefficient is around 9,000, 8936, right? So here it was 2,85,000. Here it is sorry, that is Reynolds number. So here it is around 20,000, and here it is around 9,000. So the heat transfer coefficient on the outer surface is less than, still it is not bad, but it is less than 1 on the inner surface of the inner tube. This is on the outer surface of the inner tube, right? One of the reasons why this is coming out to be low is mainly because of the velocity being low. Still, this is a quite good. You have two heat transfer coefficients. You can convert them into the resistances 1 upon HA, right? And find out 1 upon U. And if the thickness of the wall is neglected, that is, it is made up of wall and the wall thermal conductivity is very high and the thickness is also less. In that case, you might be able to neglect the wall resistance. So if you neglect the wall resistance, you can just simply write 1 upon U is equal to 1 upon HI plus 1 upon HO, right? So as of now, let's neglect the wall resistance and find out value of U. So tell me what is the value of U you get. Going to check whether what we have done is correct or not. And again, here also neglecting the fouling resistance on both the sides. So in the later part of the example, we will consider the wall resistance as well as the fouling resistance and see what is the effect of those resistance on the transfer coefficient, whether it and fouling resistance, what is the effect? How like whether that would increase the required area by a significant amount or not, or significant percentage or not. That is what we will investigate the example. Right now, only to get overall transfer coefficient will always have a value less than the lower. It means that U will be surely less than 8936. So let's see what is the value of U. So just two resistances are added. Right. So the total resistance. Now, if you are taking it based on is inner tube. So based on that, this is the heat transfer resistance that you get, and if you get the overall heat transfer coefficient, right? So that's 6010. So it's less than this 8936. That's the overall heat transfer coefficient. If you neglect the wall resistance. So as per this, now if you write Q is equal to UA delta T log min, right? Delta T log min is already available with you for the counter flow. For the counter flow, that value is put. So the area that you get is 1.173 meters square. Right. So what should be the length of this tube-in-tube heat exchanger? The total area for heat exchange divided by pi d gives you the length of around 15 meters. So this heat exchanger should have a length of 15 meters. Okay. So this is how you could solve this problem with the log mean temperature difference method. You found the log mean temperature difference with the knowledge of convective heat transfer phenomena. You found the thermal resistance method, right? Electrical analogy, applied overall heat transfer coefficient, and then you found the area required for heat, and on that you got this length of the heat exchanger, which is around coming out to be around 15 meters. Now here we had neglected the wall resistance as well as the fouling resistance. Now let us consider the calculate the parameters again. So here I have taken wall of metal whose thermal conductivity is around 60. So this could be some carbon steel or mild steel as it is called, whose thermal conductivity is around 60 watt per meter Kelvin. And consider the inner area and the outer area separately. Resistance on the inner surface is 1 upon h into A for the inner surface. So this is the resistance that you get, 4.644 into 10 raised to minus 5 Kelvin per watt. That's the unit of the thermal resistance. Then you get 9.58. So the outer surface is higher because the heat transfer coefficient is lower. So the resistance on the outer surface is almost double of the resistance on the inner surface. Which one should you address? You should address the outer tube, right? You should do something on the outer tube so that the heat transfer coefficient is higher. Then how much is the wall resistance? So it is a cylindrical system. So natural log of du upon di and 2 pi kl gives you the resistance of the tube, right? Resistance of the tube, which is 1.1 into 10 to minus 5. So it is quite less than the resistance is offered, convection resistance is offered, right? Still, it is not very low, particularly as compared to this one. Right? So it might be better not to neglect it in this case at least. Okay, so as you can see, the thermal resistance offered by the tube is around 0.3 surface. Okay. Resistances are also taken into account based on a table which is provided here. So below 50 it is written 0.0001 and above 50 0.0002. So those values have been taken. Resistance on the inner surface, which is 0.0, and outer surface resistance. So this is the inner surface resistance, outer surface resistance, the fouling resistance on the inner surface, fouling resistance on the outer surface, and the tube resistance. So the total thermal resistance is coming out to be 4.272 into 10 to minus 4 Kelvin per watt. So you can see this U, which is nothing but 1 upon R total into area, is coming out to be around 2000. Earlier, without considering these two, that is wall resistance and this fouling resistance, it came out to be around 6000. So resistance can be neglected, but the fouling resistance should not have been neglected, right? What is the effect of this wall resistance? Let's say I remove this. Okay, I don't consider this. So let's see how much this So it has slightly increased. But if you don't consider these two, let's see what is the effect. So let's say it is 1995, it becomes 5442, right? So almost 2.5 times. So you are presuming very high heat transfer coefficient, and you will make a very small heat exchanger, which when put in duty, initially it will give the required heat transfer rate, but as fouling takes place, as deposition of impurities or scaling take place, it will start giving you, and you have, like, even without considering fouling, it will suffice the requirement. As deposition start taking place, the will degrade, and it will start giving you low performance, which is not what you do. You should consider the fouling resistance, like whatever value is applicable in the given circumstance. Okay. So in this case, the both tubes had the turbulent flow, so we could use the Ditters-Boelter correlation. But if it is a laminar flow in the annulus, these are the values of Nusselt number that one should take. As you know, if it is laminar flow, then the Nusselt number is constant, right? 3.66 and 4.36, the two numbers for the two boundary conditions. But if it is flow through annulus, then according to the ratio of di upon do, for laminar flow, you have to take these values of Nusselt number. Okay, this is for the inner tube, this is for the outer tube, and this is the table for fouling which we used. Right. Now some more discussion on fouling. So a few points I would read it from this material. This is basically again from one of the NPTEL material. So fouling can be caused by the following sources. One, scaling is the most common form of fouling and is associated with inverse solubility salts. Examples of such salts are CaCO3, CaSO4, Ca3PO4 twice. So these are the different salts, and inverse solubility phenomena may take place and deposition on the tube may take place. And because of that, there will be a layer of these salts on the tube, and that will create the that will reduce the heat transfer coefficient. Corrosion fouling is caused by chemical reaction of some fluid constituents with the heat exchanger tube material. Of course, we are assuming here that we are dealing with tube in tube or shell in tube type of heat exchanger. Then chemical reaction fouling involves chemical reactions in the process stream, which results in deposition of material on the heat exchanger tubes. This commonly occurs in food processing industry. Right? If it is and one of the components has low freezing point, it might happen that it may start depositing on the heat exchange area. This commodity occurs in refineries where paraffin frequently supplies petroleum products at various stages in the refining process, obstructing both flow and heat transfer, right? Because it will reduce the cross-sectional area, it will obstruct the flow, as well as it will also resistance for the heat flow. Because all these solid layers have much lower thermal conductivity. They don't have a high thermal conductivity like that for metal. Then biological fouling is common where untreated water from natural resources such as rivers, lakes is used as a coolant. Biological microorganisms such as algae and other microbes can grow inside the heat exchanger and hinder heat transfer. Particulate fouling results from presence of microscale sized particles in solution. When such particles accumulate on a heat exchanger surface, they sometimes fuse and harden. Like scale, these deposits are difficult these go remove, right? So fouling you have to consider while you design the heat exchanger, right? So a fresh heat exchanger will also should also be supplied with the because you can design it only if you know where it is going to be used, right? The heat exchanger should not be supplied without knowing the process conditions. So whatever you should have the details of the process conditions, and if you know fouling is going to take place, which fouling is going to take place, what is the rate, you need to refer the standard tables. You cannot do it all the time with some experience. You have to have the required reference tables, and from those tables you pick up the right value, and you design the heat exchanger providing somewhat larger area so that even after some degree of fouling, it still serves the purpose. Right? But of course, you may recommend cleaning of the heat exchanger at certain interval, let's say every year or so, so that if it is continued for a very long period of time, then even a good heat exchanger may not be able to do the required job. So you have to write the required recommendation for cleaning. So this is some brief about fouling. Now we have solved this problem of a particular thing taking place in a, you can very easily understand that the length of the heat exchanger which will be used will be much longer. Like in this case, it came out to be around 15 meters, but there this heat transfer coefficient was 6,000. Now it has become 2,000. So obviously this will be 45 meters length, which will be required with the consideration of fouling and the plane. That is one of the options which you may go for. Still, many times even a compact volume. So the other you should think of other type of heat exchanger in most of the cases. So one such very popular type of heat exchanger is a shell and tube type of heat exchanger. The diagram, basic diagram of that was shown, and I hope you remember that. But to recall that, let me run a video on the shell and tube heat exchanger. So this is my American Institute of Chemical Engineers, I suppose. In industry, you will find that engineers more frequently involved as. So this is some explanation of shell and tube heat exchanger. I'll replay the video. And there is a good note on shell and tube type of heat exchanger. So all these files I'll upload in the file section about the shell and tube type of heat exchanger. So shell and tube type of heat exchanger is one of the very popular type of heat exchanger used in different industries, particularly the chemical process industries, because of the numerous advantages it is offering, as well as now there is a very large experience also in this field in the design and construction of this type of heat exchanger. Of course, in this course we cannot go into such intricate of the design, but it is have to require some basic information. So chemical or the heat exchanger, and American, because these heat exchangers are very popularly used in the Petroleum Institute Standard 660 supplements both of these standards, and chemical petroleum companies have their own internal standards in addition. Certain advantages of a shell and tube type of heat exchanger are listed down here. One, condensation or boiling heat transfer can be accommodated in a shell. Oriented, you may want to check out the heat or laboratory. Of course, disease can be handled as well, right? So actually in our lab also, that is the refrigeration and air conditioning laboratory, we have a plant called water chilling plant, and that will be taught in the thermal engineering too. So even in that, like you have an evaporator, and they are also shell type of heat exchanger. So in the condensation of and in the evaporator, evaporation or boiling takes place on the tube side. So there you will be able to use of the shell and tube type of heat exchanger. Of course, now the exchangers, the particular fin like the heat exchanger as well as a exchanger, which is becoming very popular because of the pressures and pressure drops over a wide thermal stresses can be accommodated accommodate so extended heat can be used to enhance heat transfer. Though sometimes you don't see fins, it is still not that it's never used. There may be fins on the sometimes on the outer surface of the tube, or sometimes on the inner surface of the tube, or it may be a grooved surface, which is many times also used in refrigeration industry. Cleaning and repair are relatively straightforward because of the equipment can be dismantled for this purpose. Okay. So other type of heat exchangers sometimes do not have these features, and that's one of the reasons for popularity of but then as the exchanger also to offer these features like periodic cleaning and like ability to take unclean fluid, etc. They start penetrating more and more into the industry. But otherwise, shell and tube type of heat exchanger is traditionally one of the most popular heat exchanger that is used. Now, What are the different considerations? So the tube side is used for fluid that is more likely to foul the walls because it is easier to clean the tubes rather than cleaning the shell. Okay, so a corrosive fluid or a fluid which can foul it more may be used on the tube side because cleaning of the tubes is easier than cleaning the outside. When a gas or vapor is used, generally it is introduced on the shell side. Right. One of the reasons for this could be that there is more area for flow on the shell side. Right. So gas or vapor is many times introduced on the shell side. Also, high viscosity fluids are also kept on the shell side so that there is less pressure drop, right? If more the area available for flow, less the velocity of the fluid and less the pressure drop. Okay. And then the most common material of construction is carbon steel, right? One of the reasons is that it is economical. Other materials such as stainless steel, copper are also used when needed and when the choice is dictated by corrosion concerns and mechanical strength requirement. Expansion joints are used to accommodate differential thermal expansion of dissimilar materials. Right? So some practical considerations are there. We are going to mainly focus on the heat transfer aspects. So you already know this formula Q is equal to mCp delta T for both the fluids as well as Q is equal to UA delta T log min. But here you see one more number here, F, which is a correction factor which needs to be applied because it is not purely counter current, right? Though in the video it used the word counter current, it is not completely counter current. It is in a way cross counter current. So this F value will be less than 1, and that is the main job that you will do in the heat exchanger, shell and tube heat exchanger design, as we take up an example in the next class. So we will complete this basic information about shell and tube heat exchanger in the next class, and then we will example will be involved. Rather, the example which is already solved will be extended for shell and tube type of heat exchanger. So we may keep the process same, but the type of heat exchanger will become different, and we will see what is the new dimensions and new configuration of if you use the shell and tube type of heat exchanger.